Back in 2019, I took a night shift security job at this massive office building out in rural Illinois. It used to be owned by some chemical company, but they shut it down more than a decade ago. Just left everything behind: cubicles, phones, break rooms. It was like the building had been frozen in time. The job was simple: patrol each floor a few times a night, check doors, log notes, make sure no squatters had gotten in. For the most part, it was quiet, almost too quiet. But the basement, I hated that damn basement. It was colder than the rest of the building, even in the middle of summer. No airflow, no windows, just a long, L-shaped hallway with peeling paint, rusted file cabinets, and these thick metal doors that led to old storage rooms. On my fourth night there, something weird happened. It was around 2:15 in the morning. I was doing my usual sweep of the basement when I heard a sound, soft but sharp, like scratching. At first, I thought maybe it was rats or something, but this wasn't random or frantic. It was slow, repetitive, almost deliberate. I followed the sound to one of the doors and opened it. Nothing, just concrete walls and an empty floor. I started to walk away, turned the corner in the hallway, and that's when I heard it. A door creaked shut behind me. I turned around fast, flashlight up. Every door was closed. I stood there for a few seconds, just listening. My heart was racing, but I couldn't hear anything else. No wind, no voices, just silence. I wrapped up the rest of the patrol early and headed back upstairs. 2 nights later, it got worse. Same route, same time. Only this time, one of the doors down the hallway was slightly open. That was strange. Those doors were heavy, and I always double-checked them. As I got closer, I started to get this feeling, like I wasn't alone. Right before I reached the door, I heard footsteps behind me. Not heavy boots, bare feet, on concrete. I turned around instantly. No one was there. When I looked back at the door, it was closed. I didn't even finish the sweep. Went straight to the desk, logged a mechanical fault in the system, and tried not to think about it. But the final night, that's the one I'll never forget. It was just after 3 a.m. when I went down there again. My flashlight was already out. Half the hallway lights were flickering. Some were completely dead. I was halfway through when I heard the scratching again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from one door. It was coming from all of them. Before I could react, I heard the first slam, then another, then another. All the doors along the hallway started slamming shut, one by one, like someone or something was chasing me. I bolted for the stairwell. I don't know why, but I turned around at the top of the stairs. That's when I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, just barely in the light, was this figure. It was tall, thin, barefoot, and its head was tilted way too far to the side, like it had snapped its neck and just left it that way. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. I didn't wait. I ran out, locked the door behind me, and never went back. I quit the next day. The security company didn't ask questions. They probably knew. A couple years later, the building was demolished. Gone like it never existed. But I still think about that hallway, about what was waiting behind those doors, about how cold it always felt down there, even before the scratching started, and about how I know I wasn't alone. I've worked security jobs on and off my entire life. Warehouses, malls, corporate offices, summer schools. It's quiet work for the most part. You spend long hours alone, walking silent buildings, checking doors, resetting alarms. But quiet doesn't always mean safe. My dad used to do this job too, years before I ever took my first post. He had this summer gig where he'd check 15 or 20 schools at night, just making sure they were locked up tight during the break. The idea was to knock them all out in one long shift so he could have the rest of the week off. Most of the time it was easy money, but there was one school that always stuck with him. A Catholic elementary school tucked in a rougher part of town. Small, old, crumbling brick. Inside, the walls were yellowed with age, and everything creaked, like the building itself was tired of being alive. He hated going there, said it gave him the creeps, even though nothing ever technically happened. There was one room in particular, off the side of the chapel near the back of the school. Inside it stood this massive statue of the Virgin Mary, maybe 8 feet tall. Robes painted a faded blue, hands stretched out like she was offering forgiveness or waiting to be worshipped. But it wasn't peaceful, not to him. He said there was something wrong about it, something off. At first, he chalked it up to religious trauma, strict nuns, the quiet. But every time he entered that room, he felt watched. Like the statue wasn't just there, it was aware. Eventually, he got in the habit of rushing past the room on his rounds. He'd peek in, log it, and keep walking. Didn't want to spend any more time there than he had to. Then one summer, on his last shift before taking a new job, he got curious. It was around 2 a.m. and he was doing his final pass through the building. He walked into the chapel, flashlight beam cutting through the dust. The statue was there, looming in the dark, half lit in moonlight spilling through the stained glass. He paused, and for the first time, really looked at it. That's when he noticed something odd. The eyes, they looked off, dull, hollow, like they weren't solid like the rest of the face. He stepped closer and aimed the flashlight straight at them. There were tiny drilled holes in the statue's eyes, perfect little circles. Someone had bored them out from the inside. Now the whole statue felt different. The arms weren't offering peace. They were holding space. The robes didn't flow. They hung like curtains. And the base of the statue had a seam he hadn't noticed before, a faint line along the side. Curious and creeped out, he walked behind the statue. That's when he saw it, a small latch. The whole thing was hollow. He didn't open it. He didn't want to. But suddenly, everything clicked in his head. The drilled eyes, the strange feeling of being watched, the way the statue always felt like it was facing him, no matter where he stood in the room. That night, he finished his rounds and left without looking back. When he told me the story, he was dead serious, pale. Said he didn't sleep that night, couldn't. His theory, someone had been hiding inside the statue, watching him, maybe not every night, but at least once. I didn't want to believe it. Until years later, after my dad retired, I took a contract job over the summer. School security work, same city, different time. Guess which school was still on the rotation? Same crumbling Catholic elementary school. I didn't know until I saw the building. As soon as I stepped into the chapel and saw her, I knew. She was still there. The Virgin Mary, 8 feet tall. Same robes, same hollow eyes. The seam was still there, barely visible. But this time, the latch, it was unlocked. I worked graveyard shift at a tomato plant in between towns in the Central Valley in California. It's pretty much nothing out there, other than a few houses pretty far from each other, with some dairies and open spaces. I used to smoke, and I would watch Netflix or listen to podcasts in between rounds. There's literally no one out there at all. I worked there a little over 5 years, and never did I see someone walk out there. Behind the guard shack, there was an open field. I step out to smoke, and I'm watching something in my phone. I hear someone talking and laughing behind the guard shack. I dismiss it as it's just the wind or voices carrying from the dairy down the road. I keep hearing laughing and giggling, so I decided to peek around the side. You have to understand, I grew up in an area that many would consider ghetto. Grew up around gangs and then joined the military. I'm not saying I'm a tough guy by any means, but takes a bit to scare me. Anyway, I look around the side of the small building and didn't see much, just the open field. I take a drag from the cigarette I'm smoking and tell myself I'm hearing things. I hear giggling again and take a couple of more steps, and I swear almost shit myself. I see 2 little kids in the middle of the field talking and giggling together. It looked like a little boy and a little girl, no older than 7 to 10 years old. I'm wondering WTF is going on and how they got there. I squint my eyes to make sure I'm not seeing things. All this happened within seconds, but felt like an eternity. Like I said, I couldn't believe it. They were almost see-through, and the clothes looked old, like early 20th, late 19th century clothes. Then I noticed that it looks like they only have a body from the waist up. Can't really see their legs. Just then, they got quiet. They turned to look in my direction, almost like they realized that I was watching them. When they did that, they had no freaking eyes, just dark holes where their eyes are supposed to be. Once again, like I said, this all happened within seconds. No more than a minute after seeing them. I felt this cold feeling to my bones and seriously got freaked out and got the hell out. I threw my cigarette down, turned on all the lights and closed all the blinds, including the front blinds to look out the guard shack. Those blinds had never been closed the whole time I worked there. I was almost shaking and felt this uneasy dread. I said a quick prayer and started trying to call my wife to see if she would pick up. Once again, I worked graveyard, and this was only about 2:30 at 3 a.m. I still had half my shift. I didn't do a single round the rest of my shift until the sun came out. I called and texted my wife, but she was out. Tried watching something funny on Netflix or listened to funny podcasts like Joe Rogan. The whole time I worked there, I never before, that or after that night, did I see something like that. I tried to look up what kids with black eyes were, but just kept feeling the same way I felt that night, and just let it go. It took me a while for me to process what happened that night, and finally tell my wife, and she finally convinced me to submit it to a couple of the channels I used to listen to. They were Maker and Bebuster. Every time I drive by there, I always think back to that night. I've worked security on and off for years. Side jobs, seasonal gigs, graveyard shifts. It's a quiet way to make extra money, but if you do it long enough, you start hearing things. Stories. The kind of things that don't show up in an incident report. Most of it is just creepy, late-night paranoia. Lights flickering, unlocked doors, echoes in empty buildings. But some stories, they stick with you. There's one in particular, told to me by another guard, that still makes my skin crawl. He was working solo patrol at an old arena downtown. The place was built over 100 years ago. Grand arches, retro signage, velvet seats that had long faded to brown. It closed in the early 2000s, but the city kept up basic maintenance while it waited for someone to buy it and redevelop the property. In the meantime, they assigned one overnight security guard to keep an eye on the place. Not a huge job, but still eerie. 6,000 seats, 2 upper floors, and a massive basement filled with storage, old dressing rooms, and crumbling offices. The weirdest part, upstairs, above the main stage, was a smaller, more intimate theatre, like something out of a Wes Craven movie. Velvet curtains, silent rows of chairs, an old spotlight system built into a series of wooden catwalks that ran across the ceiling. That's where the story begins. The guard, let's call him Travis, had worked that post for months. Never had any real issues. But one night, he said the building felt off. The way you walk into a room and just know you're not alone, even if you can't prove it. He pushed the feeling aside, chalked it up to nerves, or maybe the caffeine crash from his usual gas station coffee. As usual, he did a full sweep, checked the ticket counters, walked the basement corridors, even climbed up into the upper offices. All clear. Then he decided to walk the catwalk system above the main arena. A part of the building most guards didn't bother with. It's narrow, made of old wood, creaky as hell. He only went up there because he was thorough. That was his thing. Do it by the book. Halfway through, he hears it. A creak. He stops, listens. Another step, behind him. At first, he thought maybe the boards were just settling. Old building, cold night. But then he spun around and saw him. A man, standing on the catwalk, frozen mid-step, like he'd been sneaking up on him. The guy wasn't homeless looking, not really. Just so wrong. Disheveled, pale. Wearing an oversized jacket and this wide, twisted grin. Like he'd just been caught stealing from the cookie jar. But instead of a cookie, he was holding a steel pipe. Travis didn't hesitate. He drew his sidearm, leveled it at the guy, and barked out a warning. The man didn't speak. Didn't flinch, just smiled, and then bolted in the other direction, vanishing into the rafters and walkways like a ghost. Travis called the cops immediately. They showed up fast, 2 patrol units and a K9 team. The building was locked down, and they did a full sweep. Every stairwell, every sub-level. They didn't find the man, but they did find something else. Downstairs, behind the old concession stands, the dust had been disturbed. It looked like someone had been dragging their fingers through it, writing things. There were words scrawled across the counter. Childlike rhymes. Nonsense. Some of it was dark. Swing low, swing dead, 8 hang high and none get fed. Another counter was covered in stick figures. Tiny little people, all hanging from. The writing looked fresh. You could still see the trail of fingers that had traced through the grime. The working theory was that the guy had been living in the building for days, maybe longer. He'd found a way in, made a game of stalking the guard, watching him make his rounds. And the creepiest part, Travis never noticed. The man may have followed him through multiple shifts, hiding, waiting, playing a game only he knew the rules to. They never caught him. I visited that arena a couple years after I heard the story. It was still empty, still waiting for a buyer. And I remember walking past the old concession area, and sure enough, the writing was still there, faded but real, etched into the dust like a message left for someone who was supposed to come back. or a reminder that some things, and some people, never really leave. I've worked a lot of buildings since then, but I'll be honest, I never walk a dark catwalk alone anymore. I used to work security for a ski resort tucked deep in the mountains. It was one of those jobs that sounded peaceful on paper. Watch the lifts, check the lodges, keep drunk tourists from wandering off cliffs. I worked the swing shift, 4 p.m. to midnight. And because I didn't have a car, I had to walk about 20 minutes down a mountain road through dense forest to get to my bus stop. No streetlights, no traffic, just black trees, snow, and the crunch of my boots echoing in total silence. For the first week, it was kind of peaceful, cold as hell, but peaceful. Then I started seeing them. It started with one, just a set of glowing yellow eyes in the woods off the trail. A coyote, probably. Not exactly terrifying. They're like scruffy, ugly dogs, really. I'd see the eyes, hear a twig snap, and then they'd vanish into the trees. But after a few nights, there were two, then 3. By the end of the second week, I counted 8. They didn't run anymore. That was the difference. The moment there were 3 or more, they started following me, quietly, from the tree line, keeping pace like shadows on the edge of my vision. Sometimes they'd cross the road in front of me, slowly, one by one, like they were counting. They got closer too. At first they kept their distance, 40, maybe 50 yards out. Then it was 20 feet, then 15. Close enough to see their ribs through their fur, and something else. Their eyes. Coyotes don't look at you like that. These didn't seem afraid. They weren't curious either. It was like they were waiting, bar testing. I started carrying bear mace every night, thumb on the trigger. Never used it, but I came close. The worst part wasn't what I saw though, it was what I heard. Coyotes can make some horrible noises, yips, howls, screams. But one night, I swear to God, what I heard didn't sound like animals at all. It started as a low growl. Then none of them let out a sound I'll never forget. It was a screech, almost human, like someone trying to scream through a throat full of gravel. Then another answered, and another. And then I realized they weren't around me anymore. They were ahead of me, blocking the road. I stopped walking. Everything went still. I could see their eyes in the dark, low to the ground, then slowly rising up, higher than a coyote should be. I don't remember deciding to run. I just did. I sprinted the last half mile to the bus stop, heart slamming in my chest, bear mace drawn. When I finally made it to the bench under the tiny light pole, I turned around. Nothing. Just the road. Silent. Empty. But I knew they were still out there. After that night, I started getting rides from a coworker. I never walked that road alone again. But sometimes, when I think back to that season, I wonder if they really were just coyotes.